This is Module 2 of Fundamentals of Literacy, and in this module, we're going to talk about helping learners fall in love with reading. So I want to start by showing you a video.
I like to read endlessly. Like I don't like to stop.
My mom came in the room one day and she was like, "Oh, you don't read?" I was like, "Yeah, there's this teacher, Ms. Dickinson," and she was like, "Oh, the teacher that you didn't like a couple weeks ago?" And I was like, "Yeah." She gave me this book and I actually loved the book.
I was like, I hate reading. This is stupid. Later, I just discovered that that book just wasn't for me, and that there were books out there that are for me.
If you just read because you have to read, it's no fun.
When I read for fun, there's no pressure. I could read a page tomorrow and 30 the next.
I don't know why people don't like reading if they can get the things that they want, they're interested in and everything.
In education, it's like a powerful thing to have.
I want to try to challenge myself and learn new words and bigger words. I really like the word gigantic for some reason. If you don't like reading, you're missing out all the fun.
I read whenever I can. I read in the car. I'm not supposed to because supposedly it affects your eyes. But I eat a lot of carrots, so that's my justification.
My friends call it reading mode, so they won't talk to me because they know I'd be distracted, and they'd have to be like, "Lydia, stop." Every book I read, I like more than the last one.
When you read something, like, you feel the emotion. It's like, oh, yeah.
Reading makes me happy because I can learn more about stuff and think about maybe if I want to do that or not.
It has different aspects of life, while it has also unreal things, unreality.
They're not exactly talking to me, but I'm like there still. When I read the book and the person is able to like conquer all the hindrances and things that's happening, I feel I can also do it.
It helps me make the right choice.
I've had friends who, after they started reading, like they actually realized like, hey, like the streets ain't for me.
When people expect things from you, they don't expect nothing else. People never expected me to pick up a book and read, and I actually did it. I knew I could do college after I started reading.
I just think it's cool.
So helping learners fall in love with reading is one of my favorite things about teaching. And it's really no small feat, but it's critical to the success of a student for their entire lifetime. So I want us to start this module by reflecting on your own literacy journey. In today's discussion board, you're going to think about your own personal literacy journey, and I'm going to ask you to be a little transparent with all of us. When you were growing up, did you love reading and writing? And then reflect on why or why not. Who had influence on you in your literacy journey? And what was it that they did or said that had the most impact on you, whether positive or negative? And how do you believe your role as a literacy teacher is informed by your own personal literacy experiences? So once you share your own thoughts on the discussion board, take time to comment on at least 2 of your classmates' thoughts. And I'm going to start by sharing mine. Oops. So when I was growing up, I remember loving books. I could escape inside of a book for hours on end. I don't remember learning to read being particularly difficult for me, and therefore I found that I was really successful in reading and writing classes and encounters in school. And I found that books really lended themselves to this vivid imagination that I had, and I'm kind of one of those weirdos that's often let down when you go to see a movie that's been made from one of my favorite books, because I seem to enjoy the characters or settings that my mind created more than I do the ones that the movie makers create. So one thing that I will tell you though is that as a mom of 3 kids, I saw reading in a whole new light. I have 3 children who have 3 completely different reading experiences. My oldest son had some reading issues. We read to him from the time that he was born, and he loved loved that. But when he went to school, it seemed like learning and reading was just something he struggled with every step of the way, learning those foundations of reading, writing, and it really made pretty much every step of his schooling journey difficult and sometimes painful for him. My middle son, Austin, I'm going to talk to you about in a minute. He never struggled to learn to read and loved reading when he was younger and did well in school. Then some things changed for him, and I'll share that in a moment. And my daughter is a voracious reader. She loves to soak in learning from everything she reads. So 3 kids, 3 very different academic experiences with reading, but their journeys remind me that every year I'm going to have students who sit in front of me from all different kinds of backgrounds and all different starting points and all different needs. And it's my job as an educator to not just teach them the fundamentals of literacy, but the love of literacy as well. So one of my favorite quotes I heard in a reading conference that I went to a couple of years ago, and it said, "Without books, we say goodbye to untold happy hours lost in new worlds as we curl up in tree houses, on airplanes and beaches, in waiting rooms and other rooms where we might not want to be. We lose empathy and hope and joy and richness." So I told you I was going to tell you about my son, Austin. And he's now 24. But when our kids were little, we really did everything that you're supposed to do to help your kids fall in love with reading. We sat with them on our laps and we read books to them from the time they were little babies. We read to them before they went to bed. We had book tubs in our car. I had books in my purse, at church, in our house, etc. And we made books a part of our family celebrations by getting them a book each year on their birthday that they would look forward to getting to know what book we get selected, because it was something that they were interested in that year. So if that was the year of being interested in dinosaurs, they got the DK pop-up dino book. If SpongeBob was the obsession that year, then it was a SpongeBob comic book. So with all of our hard work and the hard work of kindergarten and first grade and second grade teachers, Austin just naturally developed this love of reading. Then we moved, and the school that he was going to was using a particular reading program. And this program requires students to read authentic text, which is a great thing, but then they give them a quiz at the end of the book. And if they pass the test, the book counts and they get their points and they move up in their level. If they don't pass the quiz, they don't get any points and they have to start a brand new book and start over again. And I think there are great components to this program that make it very palatable for a lot of districts. It's inexpensive, it runs itself, and it allows for this constant check-in or stream of data on different aspects of comprehension of text. But I will say that for many kids, the challenge of competition to read more books or pass tests is really appealing and can make some, but can also make some reluctant readers choose to not really want to participate. The problem, though, in my mind, exists whenever that kind of program takes over an entire curriculum of literacy instruction. It was never meant to be the sum total of a program. It was intended to be a complement to a robust, balanced literacy approach. So let me tell you what happens for some of you that don't know the program. But I also want you to know that this could be in reference to reading logs, required reading lists, or other types of things that we do in education. So sometimes when kids have to read a book on a list and then take a test on that book, and if they don't pass that book, pass that test, and all their work doesn't, quote, count towards their goals, their behavior starts to change in a myriad of ways. First, they could decide to only read books that are easy enough for them to pass the quiz about it later. Therefore, you're immediately moving them out of that sweet spot in that zone of proximal development we learned about in the last module. They'll select texts that are easy, but not ones that are challenging to them. Another unintended consequence could be where there is zero reading for pleasure, or picking up a book just because the cover looked cool or because their best friend was reading that book. The question that they'll start to ask is this a book that's on the list that I can read? If it wasn't a book that was on the list, Austin wouldn't even select it. Then if we finally got him to read one of the books on the list and he didn't pass the test, I would always hear something to the effect of, well, reading that book was a waste of my time. So that happened in 3rd grade, and it wasn't until Austin was in 7th grade, and it was the first night of winter break, and I walked by Austin's room, and this kid who, when he was in the primary grades, loved reading and almost always had a book on his hand or a book nearby, didn't enjoy reading at all, and it was something that we had to almost force him to be able to do. But I was walking by his room when he was supposed to be in bed, and I could see the light on underneath the door. And I went into the room thinking I was gonna bust him playing video games and to tell him to turn his light out. And he was under the covers with a flashlight, and I said, you know, no video games. And he said, it's not a video game, I'm reading a book. And I was like, yeah, all right. And but then I pulled back the covers, and sure enough, he was reading a book. And he started to tell me about it, and his teacher had recommended it, and there were more books in the series. And could we go the next day to try and find the next book in the series? So I asked him if he could let me look at the book, since he was supposed to be in bed. And I spent the rest of the night reading the book that once again captured the interest in reading for enjoyment. And he and I read the whole series over the break. So helping others be able to grow in their understanding of that reading should be for enjoyment. It is to learn, and it is to grow, and it is to acquire information, and all those things are vitally important. But it also is really important that nothing that we do harms the desire to read, also for enjoyment as well. So the next thing I want us to talk about is, last week we started looking at the brain, and we went through the hand motions of, you know, here's our brain. It weighs about 3 pounds. It's the consistency of tofu and jello. The frontal lobe is responsible for logical thinking and reasoning, and that it doesn't develop until late in our teen years. We learned that it's divided into 2 sections, the right side responsible for creativity and music and communication, the left side for reasoning, mathematics, numbers, order, organization, but both sides work together. We learned that inside of our brain are billions of neurons, all seeking out connections with other neurons, because the more connections it has, the stronger the memory is. And there's this great book by Marcia Tate called Worksheets Don't Grow Dendrites. And another thing that we do in reading instruction is that sometimes we overuse worksheets to try to get at what kids are thinking. And the result is kind of a flat teaching instead of those brain-based strategies that we learned about last week. There's a place for those things, but they should be the exception and not just the rule. So I attached a link here for you to be able to look at how neurons work, this article. If you want to get some more information about how to really develop a reading program or a learning program that really does grow those dendrites, grow that ability to make connections. And it's really vital for us to continue to keep pushing ourselves to learn more about that. Right? For the last point of Module 1, Part 1, I'd like for you to take time to read Chapter 2 of Kelly Gallagher's book, Read-A-Side. The chapter is called Endangered Mind, and in it, Mr. Gallagher outlines what he sees as the 3 biggest threats to the love of reading. He outlines these three points that he believes endangers students' mind: a dearth of interesting reading materials. He says that we are removing challenging novels from students. And then the third thing is, he said that there's not enough real, authentic reading happening in school. And so what I want you to do is I want you to read the chapter, and then when you're done reading, take time to write a reader's response to this question. Out of the 3 main points that Gallagher makes that endanger our students' mind, which one do you believe is the most prevalent in classrooms today? And what do you think can be done to overcome those endangerments? And you're going to write your response in one of the assignments that's in Canvas for you in Module 2.